Hi, my name is Brandie Paterakis, and I'm the owner of Blue Bee Counseling Services. I'm a mother and wife who is passionate about life and has found joy in helping others improve their mental health. The goal of this podcast is not only to provide enriching entertainment, but to help others in their pathway to have a more fulfilling life. This in no way is a replacement for therapy. Follow us on this journey of mental health awareness. Blue Bee Counseling Services now presents this podcast, Therapist Table Talk. Welcome to Therapist Table Talk. My name is Brandie Paterakis, and I'm an LCSW and own Blue Bee Counseling Services here in South Jordan. And I have my two friends with me today, which is Logan. Do you want to start introducing yourself?
I'm currently at the studying in the bachelor's program, social work program at the University of Utah, and I am doing the marketing for Brandie for Blue Bee Counseling.
That's right. And then we have a fun guest speaker here, Chelsea.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Armstrong. I'm also an LCSW, and I have a private practice called Utah Elevated Counseling.
Awesome. This is so awesome. We're so excited to have her. Chelsea is a world of knowledge at her fingertips. So you are lucky if you're watching this or listening to this today, so you can hear all of the things that she has. And so I guess you're all kind of wondering, what is our topic that we are going to be discussing today? Because, Therapist Table Talk, we discuss all sorts of mental health complications that are happening in the world. And there's some things that just kind of come up a lot, don't they, Chelsea?
Yes, definitely.
Especially high expectations.
Absolutely.
So how do you feel like what do you see in your office with high expectations?
I see a lot of anxiety. So a lot of clients I'm working with right now have anxiety, and I think a lot of it kind of is connected to this pressure that they either feel from others or that they put on themselves, and that can get them really stressed and anxious in all different areas of their life.
Yeah, I totally can relate to that. I'm kind of seeing the same thing you are, and so I thought, let's put together a little podcast or a video that has to do with high expectations. And so in this topic, I kind of thought of a couple of things to define it, which I thought was kind of interesting. So listen to this. Here are a few things I heard. I have to be perfect, and to be perfect or loved, I have to feel like I'm in control. Expectations are premeditated resentments. Oh, that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
If I have expectations for you, then I have resentments towards you if you don't fulfill those expectations. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or when those unfulfilled expectations involve the failure of other people to behave the way you expect them to, the disappointment also involves resentment. And these are all kind of based on psychology today, which I thought was really interesting. So, Logan, you're in school. You're not just in any school. You are in the bachelor's program. And I'm not sure. Where did you go to school at, Chelsea?
So I got my master's at the U.
Oh, you did?
You are, right?
Okay, yeah. That's where I got mine too. We are a bunch of full U graduates here. But Logan, tell me a little bit about some of the expectations that are kind of being put on you right now in the school program. Being involved in school and having to be in the bachelor's program.
I mean, I think expectations with, not necessarily just in school, but there's lots of expectations held to me right now. There's expectations of, working to be able to provide for myself and to be able to pay for school. There's expectations in, relationships with friends, with social life, which is really hard to balance that with, not just school in general, but to balance that with, friendships, with my work and being able to participate in those outside activities when I do have a lot of homework. So I think there's a lot of expectations of all of these things that I have to constantly do, and to all of these high goals that I have to reach. They expect, just schools in general expect you to be very successful with your classes and to be very knowledgeable, and that just expectation alone and to get good grades is really difficult when it comes with that and having to work full time and all these other little things that we all have to do.
Did you feel some of the PTSD from schooling when you were there? I was like, I was feeling then not only that, but you also are a newlywed. How do you say that?
Yeah.
A newlywed. So
Right.
I'm sure there's like expectations of trying to navigate that whole marriage as well, of like some of the things that he's bringing into the marriage and some of the things that you're bringing into the marriage,
Right.
and then how to cultivate like this combination of things together. How is that going with like expectations?
No, it's great until I need to use his computer to use the Cricut. And he's trying to do homework. Just kidding. He got me a computer, so we're good. But
So what you're saying here is...
No, just kidding. But I mean, really, there's like expectations on, I go back to the work, right? There's expectations on like I need to like bring in this portion. And like he needs to bring in this portion, and so then, but as a team we can work together. And I think, you know, really with expectations, the person that's setting those expectations and the other person on the other side of it, if it's a two-way street, right, they need to work together, because you can't set these expectations without setting goals, and you can't set like have these high expectations and just assume that this person's going to reach that, right? You have to work together as a team. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what relationships are, right? In order to, we have these high expectations of, oh, I expected you to do this, but, you know, maybe if in some circumstance it's like, I expected you to do the dishes, right? But then, oh, well, I never asked you to do the dishes. I never asked if you would be willing to do them. So why did I set those expectations to do that? Anyways, I'm rambling, but.
No, I love it. I want you to keep on going, because I feel the same way in my own life. I don't know. What do you think, Chelsea? You're married and have some childrens.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think what she's describing is sort of, you know, either self-oriented kind of expectations, or if she feels like pressure from somebody else. So, you know, if she feels like someone else is expecting her to live up to this standard, and if she doesn't do it, she might make them feel bad, or they'll be disappointed in her, where we can also do that to ourselves. We can also kind of get in our own mind of sort of these expectations we set for ourselves, and those standards might be really high and hard to reach, and then we feel really shameful and disappointed and upset when we don't reach those standards. So it's a lot of pressure, and it's a lot of tension when it gets to that place.
That is true. I used to always think that, you know, with a lot of pressure comes a beautiful diamond.
Right.
And so there is hope at the end, but to navigate that and make sure that the pressure is over time and not all at once, I think can be helpful too.
Yeah.
I love how you talked about pressure, or talking about expectations that are self-oriented as well as, you know, inflicted upon by other people. Mm-hmm. I think that's very valid to think about.
Yeah, definitely. Because it allows you to kind of look at where, like, when you're feeling these high expectations and this pressure, where that's coming from, so that you know how to manage it. And if it is coming from others, then you're going to be working with those people at kind of managing their expectations, so that you're not put in that position all the time.
Ooh, so then we get in people pleasing. Got it. Or yes men.
Yeah.
You
right.
know?
Yeah.
Yes men or people pleasing. I mean, that is one of the things that I think I grew up with, was like the need to people please, because I felt the need that if I pleased others, then I was good.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it can make it really hard to do that all the time for everyone, and you know, cause a lot of anxiety and stress. So
for sure.
Well, and I think when you do that as well, then you're, you know, if like you're not giving the relationship what it needs, you're giving what that person needs too. And like for those expectations, I feel like that can hurt relationships as well, if you're just like trying to please rather than like trying to build up your relationship, if that makes sense, like together. I go back to the teamwork, but
teamwork is important in managing expectations, and I think sometimes it's facilitating that conversation, because I don't know about you guys, but there's been a lot of expectations that I hold, or that I hold upon other people, and without even like letting them know that I'm holding them for them. Like, hey, guess
and
what?
then you don't know that you're actually holding it upon them. That's where it gets fun.
Yeah.
It's my issue, not your issue. So
yeah. And then when we get caught in that trap of recognizing that we're doing that to another person, of like, Oh my gosh, I totally expected you that when I went away this weekend on a girls' trip, I expected the dishes to be done and the house to be cleaned.
The dishes.
I'm hungry. I am hungry and dinner needs to be ready. And then my husband, he's always like, oh, that's what you expected of me? Because I thought you just wanted your children to stay alive. Like,
right.
Why are we
Minimal
upping
standards.
Yes. Yes. And then I have a question for you knowledgeable graduates. So with like setting people that set expectations on themselves, how are some ways to help reach that, or to like, I guess the mental standpoint of like recognizing that there's an expectation and how to like be able to reach that rather than just expecting it.
Ooh,
if that makes
good.
sense.
I like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think you have to think of it. I don't think expectations are just a bad thing altogether.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's good to have expectations on ourselves and to try to push ourselves to reach goals and challenge ourselves. And it's good to have expectations on others too, because, you know, you want to make sure people treat you well and that, you know, they're doing things that, you know, make your life better and happy. And so there's just a line, I think, that can cross. And so you have to kind of watch for that. You want to set goals and you want to set expectations and communicate that to others, but you don't want it to cross into this line of destructive. And there's kind of a few ways that you can look at, you know, how is it getting destructive? And then you work on kind of managing that when it kind of turns into perfectionism, right?
And that just, so we're all aware of what perfectionism, it's basically unrealistic goals or unrealistic, trying to obtain unrealistic things that you're not going to be able to really reach. And because as we know, I mean, none of us are perfect, right? Yeah. And so perfectionism is that reaching of something that's unobtainable. And so I kind of think that this also falls into the realm of like, you know, expectations, having and setting high expectations to reach to push us, but then also recognizing like unrealistic expectations. Like, and I think sometimes we use the word high expectations as the unrealistic expectations, you know? And so I think that it would be nice if we could all define it better, but we don't in society, do we? And so we have to, and I think that's where Chelsea comes in and says, okay, here's the limitations, and recognizing like, there's hurtful patterns that are going to start taking place. And maybe we can talk about some of the hurtful things. And so I came up with a list of traps, which I love the whole idea of like falling into traps. I use that a lot with my clients of like, how do you recognize when you're falling into the trap of high expectations or unrealistic expectations? And so some of them that I think is, you know, do I believe that others want the same things I do? You know, and I think that can be a trap that we can fall into. Maybe putting upon them expectations that really they don't want to have on their life. What do you think about that?
This is like a really weird example, but this is the first thing that popped in mind. I remember like someone was telling me about how like when you're like helping massage someone's back, you always hit the points that you need, right? Like you're like, oh, well, like just, so it's just a trigger where you're just like, oh, like you think that they need what you want, or you know what I mean? And so I think this could be the same in the situation of expectations, you know, being like, well, this is like, I, you know, expected you to do this, or
because it's
anyways.
my need.
My need.
Or like, it's okay for you to like wash your hands 500 times a day because that's what I do also. But it's not okay for you to like go and check your mail 500 times a day, you know,
right?
So because I do it, it all of a sudden becomes okay that we do it. You know? It's kind of interesting.
Like our individual norms, or I guess with that is like,
I kind of think that kind of also goes on the line of like our passions and excitements that we have about things too, like, and that kind of can sometimes get in the way. Of
like having a hard time being like, well, I'm so passionate about this, like, why aren't you this happy about it, like, with me, you know? And just, I think there's so many times a day that we, like, become disappointed in, people or situations because we had this like grand idea. Like this last weekend, I was so excited to go out with my friends to Bear Lake, and I mean we had a great time, except the whole day Friday, like one of the cars broke down, we had to go drive all the way back, and then we didn't get to do all like in my head all these plans that I had planned to like play all these games I brought and to like
there's a word for
do
that.
all this.
It's called expectation.
Yes, beautiful. Wow, I'm glad we're talking about this. And so it was like and so I was really disappointed because there were all these events that I wasn't planning on because I wanted to play my game with everyone and I wanted to teach everyone my game that I was so excited to play. And so I think there was just expectation, whereas if I didn't have that like set, I don't know if that makes sense, like scenario of like how everything played out, then I wouldn't have been disappointed. But I don't know what you guys professionally have to say about all that.
Yeah, I think what you're describing, so when I think of traps with expectations, because I do like the idea of expectations, I think we need to push ourselves. But I think one of the biggest kind of mental traps is how you respond to if those expectations aren't met. So if you have this plan for your trip and you're bringing games and you kind of set an itinerary and you're excited, like that can really help your trip go well. But you can't guarantee that everything's going to go smoothly every time. And so you also have to sort of be mentally prepared for if it doesn't go that way, how are you going to cope? And if it's extreme, if your reaction is extreme, then you know that you've kind of set those standards in this really small box of now I'm so disappointed, I'm so upset. And so that's one of the things to look for with, am I setting my expectations too high, is sort of your response if it doesn't go the way you want. Or if you set expectations for yourself and you don't achieve those things and then you're in despair and you're having a lot of self-hatred, then you know that you're kind of getting into that perfectionistic place, right? Because it's hard for you to manage if you fail at something or if you don't meet those high standards. And so that's one of the biggest things to look for with expectations is sort of your response when it doesn't go that way, so that you can kind of manage, some of that and kind of widen your box a little and say, okay, I'd like to do this, but we're going to be okay with if things don't go exactly like I want it to.
Right? I love that because that is a really great analogy of how sometimes we get stuck in thinking a certain way. And I think that it's kind of interesting because sometimes you want to tell people what your expectations are. Is like, I have this great game and I want to play it, know, but at the same time, it's just kind of one of those non-talked about things that's like deep down inside yourself and you don't like vocalize it to other people. And so I think that is fundamentally like one of the things that I like to recognize as well is like we fall in the trap of not communicating effectively what it is our expectations are. And then also allowing ourselves to open up the dialogue to communicate about it and maybe be willing to compromise. Oh, I hate that word. Like, especially when you have high expectations that you really want to do it right, Chelsea. And then you're like, and we don't get to play my game. Oh, but that's kind of some of the fun things that I kind of think about with expectations as well. Yeah. And I think that sometimes we also get scared for people to find out who we really are. Like, so then we do this expectation thing where we like put upon others the expectation of like doing something so they don't find out who we are.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I'm fearful my deep worst nightmare is this. And so then I have this expectation centered around trying to perfect myself in all aspects so nobody finds out secretly who that is. I think that can be a trap that we can fall into as well. Another trap that I think is really interesting is, and it was something that you brought up that I think is really good, is recognizing that like sometimes as parents, like I have these expectations for my children, but, and I also have expectations on society. So I have these expectations on society of like what a parent looks like in like my culture or my society. And then I take that and I put it upon my children or upon my neighbors or upon like my spouse or even at the workplace. And I say, this is what I expect needs to happen. And I think sometimes that can cause us to fall short a little bit because in those expectations, then I don't really get to be the mother that child needs me to be, because I'm so worried about being the mother that I think I need to be based on these expectations of what's surrounding around me. And so my child might not need, a really great pair of shoes at the store. I mean, my kids would probably be freaking out right now. Don't worry, kids. You'll get your shoes if you want your shoes. You got to work for them. But maybe it's not about the shoes. Maybe it's more about like spending quality time with them, or, finding moments where we can like explore and do fun things together, or whatever else it is. Or same with our husbands, right? Like I have this expectation with my husband that he needs to be a certain thing, but do I really look at like what expectation it is that he needs of me, not necessarily the one that I present and put upon him. So what do you think about that? It's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you have to have some flexibility. You have to kind of be flexible with those around you and recognize that it doesn't have to be exactly this way. You have to be flexible with yourself too, to make sure that you're not cornering yourself in this place where it's like, this is how I have to do it, and this is what, like, these are my expectations. So having some of that flexibility can kind of, just that cognitive flexibility of, hey, I can think differently about this and look at this differently than maybe I had planned in my mind.
Yes.
I think you're also describing kind of when I work with clients, one of the big things we look at is comparisons. And so like being really cautious about the comparisons you're making, because if you're trying to parent based on trying to be like this person, or do things that you see this mom do, or hope that you can be as good as this family over here, you end up kind of being misguided, because you're just, trying to react to what you see over there rather than say what's going to be best for the situation. So that kind of helps with flexibility if you're not doing those comparisons. And it helps just with feeling better about yourself and just recognizing that, like, I don't need to match this person in this way. I can, just be happy with things going this way.
I love that. I think it's kind of funny because, like, I heard this story that my mother told me. I don't even know what it's called. If you know what it's called, message in, let us know what this is called. But it was kind of like the story about Timmy, and this little Timmy, he just wanted to talk and be like Johnny. And that's all he obsessed about, was wanting to talk and be like Johnny. And he had these expectations that, he was going to grow up and be like Johnny. And then he found out that Johnny wanted to be like Toby, who wanted to be like Sam, who wanted to be like Fred. And who did Fred want to be like? Yeah, no other than the first.
Little Timmy.
Little Timmy. Cute little Timmy. And so here we are stuck at, like, sometimes our expectations go in circles, and we have these expectations of, like, if I could just get this way, and it goes in this full circle of only to find out that everybody wants to walk and talk like you,
Yeah, and I think, like, also a lot of times this goes more towards the perfectionism, is we compare our worst to everyone else's best. And so then that's where it's like, oh, like you mentioned it being like parenting, seeing someone buy their kids shoes and then being like, oh, well, like I need to buy my kids shoes then, you know what I mean? And just like, I don't know why, but we really do compare, like, our worst days to other people's best days and be like, why can't I be like them? Why can't I do this like that? And the comparison's really such a killer, I think, like,
Definitely.
with the expectations and with the perfectionism and, like, all of this stuff. I think it really, like, affects who you are as a person with comparing to others.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it also models for our children too exactly how they need to, like, navigate perfectionism and self-love and all of that, which can be helpful or hurtful. I think that it's also interesting, you brought it around, Chelsea, a little bit about, like, we were kind of going in the direction of, like, emotional intelligence too.
Yeah.
Like, recognizing and being aware of some of the things is sometimes just the fundamental start, and that's, sometimes I get the clients that come in my office and they're like, I get this. I have these high expectations that are unrealistic. Because again, high expectations are not bad. It's when they become unrealistic or they start hurting us. And so And then they come in my office and they're like, what? I get it. I have this, but I don't know what to do with it. And I think that's kind of interesting. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that is like, okay, so now we recognize we've got high expectations or unrealistic expectations that are really not obtainable. And, how are some ways that we can like navigate this, in our lives and help others too, of like trying to give them a little bit of help on what they should do if they find out that they have high expectations or expectations that are unreachable.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like with my clients, I usually, for most issues that are coming up, we usually go and look back at like the source, right? So I'll have them kind of look, even if they have to look into childhood and recognize, were there any experiences I had, any traumas that I experienced, or just maybe the way that my parents were, even if they weren't abusive, like was there anything that sort of sent that message to me growing up that kind of created those core beliefs of I need to be perfect, I need to achieve. And starting with that, you can kind of look at where that came from and then figure out, okay, what do I do about it? Some of the stuff is in the past, so there's nothing you can really do except for just recognize, yeah, I think this is where this started with me. And then you can do some trauma work with it if it's severe enough, or you can look at starting to kind of shift and say, hey, I'm not in that situation anymore. I'm not being told by these people or this institution or whatever that this is what I have to achieve. How can I sort of shift my mindset so that I'm not kind of putting myself in that stressful place all the time? So we kind of start with looking at sort of where that came from and what messages they got growing up that sort of led them to some of that self-oriented perfectionism, right?
I love that. That is really great. I like the idea of also like some of the times I have to tell my clients is like, well, the good news is like you recognize that you have it. I think sometimes we get stuck and then, anxiety starts setting in and fear of the future. And then we're like, I get these clients that come in my office and they're like, I have anxiety and I'm having panic attacks and I'm struggling to get out of the bed in the morning and I'm frustrated with life in general, sometimes even suicidal ideations, right? And so then I have to pull back and say, ooh, like where is it that we start here? And if we start looking at things that they're finding really important to them, and they're putting their list together on a board, and sometimes it's like 1, 2, and 3 is like, not really what 1, 2, and 3 they desire to be like. Yeah. And so then it's like, is our words of 1, 2, and 3 actually our actions of what 1, 2, and 3 are? So example is like, sometimes I'll have people that will put up like, my family comes first, and that's 1. And then 2 would be like, well, my job, right? I really enjoy my job. And then 3 is like my friends and family. But then we start looking at the actions and we start recognizing that the actions aren't really upholding family as number 1, but really family is down at number 5 because of all the experience or all the what is it called? Like stuff that they're putting in, or the effort is all going into like job. And so then job becomes number 1. And so then sometimes correcting that and then setting our expectations and being like, what is it that you expect, or what is it that you want to have happen? And if, sometimes it's just accepting the fact that right now in this moment, like my family does have to come at number 5 because I have this really important thing that's due at work, and I've got to like put the family a little bit on the back burner. And it doesn't mean that it's right or okay for them, but sometimes it just kind of has to happen. And I think it's like setting expectations that are like realistic. And
yeah, definitely. I think that's kind of moving into, okay, we've learned about sort of where this is all coming from, what messages you got. Now you're here in the present, and how do you interact with your life differently, right?
Yes.
How do you have some, flexibility with yourself and some leniency with yourself, some self-compassion, so that you're not so hard on yourself if family comes fifth, right? Mm-hmm. That you're recognizing, that's okay. Like, it doesn't mean I'm a horrible person. It just means right now I really need to focus on this. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of some of that cognitive work you have to do after you've kind of moved through, let's figure out where these core beliefs came from, and let's check your thoughts now and make sure that you're being kind to yourself and allowing giving yourself some of these allowances so that you're not feeling all that pressure and being hard on yourself day after day.
That is awesome. I love that. I kind of look at it like this. I have this paper here, and I'm going to show, Logan will end up putting it up on so you guys can all see it. But it's a picture of two ladders, and one ladder has like a lot of space in between each slat, and the other one is very, very small slats that kind of go through it. And I find it interesting because it says the importance of smaller steps, and this really hits home to me for expectations, because sometimes we set our expectations so high that we can't actually reach even the first step. And by the time we look over at our partner who's next door and they're running up their ladder because their steps are easily obtainable, and it might even have the same goal at the top, but reaching it differently makes all the difference in the world. And so I thought that's interesting to maybe lower the slats just a little bit. And I think some of that kind of comes into having an awakening where you recognize it. You recognize that you're struggling with anxiety or you're struggling with high expectations, and then how to what's the next step then, which is some of the things that we've kind of been talking about, which I think is great. Sometimes I like the 1% better. Mm-hmm. Just working on that 1% better to get better. Sometimes I think we have to, I don't know how many people you talk to that come into your office and they're like, okay, so next week I should be good, right? And you're like, no.
Give it time.
Yeah.
Give it time. Yeah.
The 1% better. None of us like 1% better. But 1% better by the end of the year, maybe we're 50% better. Mm-hmm. If we just take the 1% better every single day and add it onto one another, and just changing the small things, I think can be so helpful. Or even maybe 0.5% better, or 0.1, whatever it is. Yeah, something that can guide, just those itty bitty steps that kind of help, get us down to the right track of just moving somewhere instead of just sitting here in our sorrow or frustrations of our expectations. I kind of wonder, I don't know, what do you guys think about gratitude too?
In regards to expectations?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it depends. If it's expectations on ourselves, then we can kind of be, if we're being extra hard on ourselves or really down because we're not meeting these high standards we have for ourselves, sometimes we can practice gratitude to kind of help remind ourselves, hey, it's okay. I can do this, and I'm grateful that I have this in my life, and, not get so discouraged. Same with others. If we have really kind of others-oriented kind of perfectionistic stuff, then we can also try to look at gratitude for, okay, maybe this person's not exactly this place and exactly where I want them to be or doing what I want them to do, but I can be grateful for what they are doing and their efforts that they are making, rather than just being hyper-focused with this tunnel vision on they're not meeting this, they're not meeting this need, or they're not doing this way. So just trying to turn the mind to gratitude and kind of being grateful for them.
I like that. Yeah.
And I think with individually, having high expectations for yourself, sometimes you really need to look at wow, look at how far I've already come. And recognizing that, because maybe that person at the top of the ladder is just wow, I can't do it anymore, even though all their little steps. And then they have to look back and be okay, look, I've already come all this far. I've already progressed and become this much better. Let's just keep going, and because there's that high expectation at the very top, but you can keep continually to be better. And we set expectations for ourselves, and I love that you said that they're good, they can be good, and to make them good, and just to have that gratitude of, I've come this far, and I'm looking at like what I can become as well, and what I can accomplish and do.
Exactly. I think that is really great information today. I love all of the fun stuff that we've discussed and talked about. Is there any sort of suggestions, like any final ideas on like what it is that you want to have happen in like maybe your own lives or with expectations that can kind of just make a little bit of a difference for a changeover, maybe even for like new therapists out there? Because I don't know about you, when I started as a new therapist, I was scared to death.
Yeah.
I was thrown in this office with these people, and I had this expectation that I was supposed to save them, and fix all their problems. And I thought that's hilarious, actually.
Yeah, that's high expectations.
There you go, people today. Here we go. High expectations, roundabout, right to me. Excellent. That's great. Yeah. What do you guys think about that? Any last words?
I think like therapists just need to trust themselves and that, understand, maybe not lower their expectations, but just be realistic about, I'm a new therapist and I'm learning. And, I remember like back in the day when I was a new therapist, just trying to prepare myself, trying to feel prepared for clients. And I thought that was good. That wasn't pressure. That was just me sort of driving myself to, hey, I want to be a better therapist. I want to read before this client comes in on what I can do to help them. And so just like kind of trying to balance patience with yourself with seeking further knowledge and further training. Like those two things can be really helpful in those early years of therapy. You can also think about, I probably with most of my clients, if they're struggling with this stuff, would do some cognitive behavior therapy, because we're really going to look at, kind of what's going on in their mind and how their thoughts are sort of driving this stress and this anxiety, and help them sort of challenge that and recognize, hey, this is black and white thinking. I'm not a complete failure in every way of life if I mess up one thing. And so just getting them working on some of those cognitive skills so that they're not going into those thinking traps and getting stuck there and depressed and, feeling shameful and all of that. So that's a good way to kind of think of it is what's going on in your client's mind and how can you help them manage those thoughts, right?
I kind of go into validating a ton too. Is like sometimes our clients just want to be heard, validated, and understood. And sometimes if you can start with the validation of like, that's a very normal feeling to have. Those I can understand why you have those expectations. That's totally understandable why you would have those. And then I can just feel their body just kind of going like, someone hears me and understands, that I'm struggling with some things, and it's nice to be heard and understood. And so
absolutely.
I think that can be helpful. Anyway, well, I think that there are some wonderful things here. And I mean, as realistically, we could talk about high expectations all day long. Like, we're feeling very big in this world, and there's a lot of things that are put on our shoulders. And it's totally understandable that, we might have some struggles with high expectations or perfectionism or unrealistic expectations. And I think it kind of just goes back to recognizing the fact that we are human. We're human. We make mistakes, and sometimes it's just recognizing that you make a mistake and then just picking yourself up, changing it, tweaking it just a little bit, and moving forward and in the right direction that you think might be a little bit helpful. And then if you fall again, pick ourselves back up and just start again and do the thing again. And so, and then giving yourself a little bit of self-love in the process. And I think that is like the key to navigating expectations.
Totally. We need to be generous with ourselves and have self-compassion. And I think about, like, I'll ask my clients, if they're so upset with themselves, I'll say, what would you say to your friend, right? If your friend was like, oh, I'm such a loser, I totally failed at this, like, what would you say to them? And then, of course, if they love their friend, they're going to be compassionate and loving, and no, you're not a loser, you're amazing, everyone makes mistakes. And so I just kind of have them turn that on themselves and say, are you saying that to yourself, or are you saying something else to yourself? So if they're not saying that to themselves, they're probably having a lot of that self-talk, that self-destructive self-talk. And so that's kind of a way to think about self-compassion is, hey, how would I treat somebody else struggling with this? I need to start to treat myself that way too.
Ooh, that's good. I actually had a friend tell me one time, like, is that how you talk to my best friend? And I was like, oh, dang. Like, that kind of hit home for me. I was thinking, well, okay, I need to be a better example of like how I talk to myself to navigate it, not only for my teenage girls who are at home, who have all sorts of, they all are struggling with self-destructive thoughts and behaviors with navigating loving themselves. And so, but really like setting the example that it's okay, and I give myself permission to love myself, and that is good enough. Anyway.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Love it.
Well, thank you for joining us today. We're so excited for Therapist Table Talk, where we talk just about therapeutic interventions here at the table, which is kind of exciting. And next time, we hope to see you next time. Follow our website, and hopefully, you never know, maybe we'll have something that might help you out a little. Until next time, thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.